Your plant hasn't been looking well lately? Check it very closely. It might just be covered with scale. Here's what to look for and how to take care of it. During this video, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to deal with scale and a way to deal with aphids. And at the end of the video, you'll see what the plant looks like 2 months after we dealt with the scale. This is the scale insect on the flowering maple that I've brought inside. It is difficult to control scale with a spray-on insecticide because it has this scale that's working like armor. My flowering maple is completely and severely infested. All the way down from the base, all the way up through, not quite to the ends because scale doesn't usually focus on the new tip growth, but it has a severe infestation. Now, if you had a small one, if you had caught it early, rubbing alcohol, put some on a little cotton swab tip and come in and you touch it right to that scale insect and it will dry them out and kill them. Spraying them with a pesticide is rarely effective at all. The best way to control them is before they get started, use a systemic insecticide. That's one that the plant takes into itself and makes itself poisonous to whatever gets getting started on it. Your infestations will not start. You can check for sure this is the scale rather than like a root trying to get budded, because you push on it and it'll give a little pop and it will squirt out from underneath that scale. That insect right there is sucking on the leaves and the juices and sucking them right out of that plant. Like I said, this is a pretty severe infestation. It is all up and down, dozens and dozens and dozens, right up within a couple inches of stem. Now, this plant has been outside and I just brought it in. I didn't follow my own advice by putting a systemic down before I brought it in, or trimming it way back before I brought it in, or even spraying it down with neem oil like I normally do before I brought it in. I moved and had other things going on, and this is the reason why you don't want to do that. Don't want to skip doing that. Right there you can see some aphids. So this plant has a lot going on. I'm going to, being this is early winter, I'm going to go straight in and cut this, prune this way back. It's going to remove almost all the infestation from this plant. I will put a systemic on the soil so the new growth will be protected, and keep a super close eye on all the rest of my plants to see that it hasn't spread. Here you can see the base of more of that plant, where I'm going to go right ahead and prune this way back to the base. Just above a leaf bud is a good place to prune this to, or a leaf crotch where this is coming out of. This one's pretty good without many insects on it, so I'm going to cut it up there because I have some branching. But if you can see this bud right here, I'm going to cut to right after that so it will branch right there. Same here. There's a bud right here. I'm going to cut right above to that. And I am taking all of this growth off. It is going to remove that scale infestation completely. It's also going to completely remove the aphid infestation. And again, I'm cutting this one right here because there's a bud facing the other way here. It's just above that bud. Now, when this new growth gets started, which will happen quite quickly because of the size root system that is on this plant. It's a vigorous plant. As soon as it grows just about that high, I'm just going to nip the very end. That will encourage that to branch as it's going along rather than have long straight shoots out of there. This is the same flowering maple that I trimmed back from scale earlier. You can see all the growth that's been put on. I do need to start giving it some fertilizer. You can see I have a good 6 inches just on this bit here. You can see right here it's starting to put on some flower buds. I want to trim that back to encourage branching from the rest of this rather than the long straight shoot. As much as it breaks my heart to trim back and cut off the flower buds, this is what I'm going to do now instead of waiting. Now, choosing where to trim it back, whether to trim it back to this leaf node or trim it back to this leaf node or this one, the way I choose where to trim that back to is looking where the bud is coming from on that branch. Now on this branch, if I trim it back here, this bud is pointing towards the rest of the pot. It's going to cross over, and I do not want to have cross branches. So I will not trim back to this one here, but this one is pointing out away from the pot. I'm going to trim back to this bud here. Now, being young growth, I can go ahead and I can just pinch that back with my fingers. All of these long straight shoots, I'm going to do the same thing to. Again, I do have flower buds I'm going to have to nip off, but I do want to make sure that branching happens. This one, I already just barely nipped back. This bud is on the outside, and it's going to head off this direction. Plus, I kept some flower buds. That's awesome. This one I'm going to have to give a prune to. I want to come back all the way to this bud right here, so that its growth is going to head off away from the middle of the plant. Now it's getting a little bit firmer back there, so let me actually grab my pruners. I want to nip that back to just above that bud here. You can continue that with all of the long straight shoots. This is really going to maximize the flowers for later in the season.